Hello and welcome to our conversation on accounting. The focus of this session is to understand the impact of buyback of shares on the financial statements. We know that buyback of shares is one of the methods of reducing capital by which a company purchases shares, its own shares from its shareholders. And that can happen through an open market operation or through tendering process. So in this example, we will try to understand the impact of the buyback of shares on the financial statements. So the company bought back shares of 500 shares at 100 each. And this process of buyback was approved by the board of directors. So we will examine whether this has fulfilled the conditions laid down by SEBI and the Companies Act, and also examine the impact of that on the financial statements. To see the, let us first see the volume of the buyback and the value of buyback of shares. So the volume is 500 shares, which is 5% of the number of shares, because the existing number of shares is 10,000. Existing number of shares is 10,000, and the company is buying back 500. So 5% of the shares have been bought back. Because the shares bought back is less than 5% of the number of shares paid up capital, the approval of the board is sufficient. Let us find the value of the share. The buyback of shares has happened at 110. So therefore, the value of the buyback, the money payable, is 110 by 500. So it is 55,000, which is 8% of the capital plus reserves, which is equity. So therefore, the buyback value is also less than 10%. So because the buyback value is less than 10% and the volume is less than 10%, the approval of board is sufficient to do and to go for the buyback. Now, besides this approval, let us see whether other conditions have been fulfilled or not. One of them is a paid up share. The shares have to be fully paid up. So in this case, the shares have been fully paid up. So number one. Number two, there has to be reserves, sufficient reserves for buyback. So the company is having sufficient reserves on the balance sheet. And another important condition is the debt equity ratio. We can see that the debt equity ratio at present is far below 1, and as per the condition, the post buyback, the debt equity ratio not supposed to exceed 2:1. Because the buyback at present the debt equity ratio is far below 2:1, this buyback will not have much impact on the debt equity ratio. So with this understanding, as well as we see there is a sufficient cash on the balance sheet, so they're not required to sell any asset. They're not required to, the company is not required to make any fresh issue of any other security to go for the buyback. Now with this understanding, let us see the impact of this buyback on the financial statement. To do that, let us classify this 110 into face value and the premium. So the face value is 10. The shares have been bought back at a premium of 100. So the capital will reduce by the face value of the shares bought back. Capital will reduce by the face value of the shares bought back, and the reserves will reduce by the premium at which the shares have been bought back. And the the so therefore you have to make a payment. You have to make a payment for the buyback, which is capital reduction, the cash outflow, and the share premium is also cash outflow, assuming that the cash have been paid immediately. So the capital will reduce by 5,000 and reserves will reduce by the premium that has been paid. Okay, the premium that has been paid is 50,000. Premium that has been paid is 50. Okay, so reduction in capital and reduction in premium. At the same time, the cash in hand will reduce to the extent of the cash in hand will change. We can see that, and as per the principle, we have to create a capital redemption reserve amount transferred from the reserves to the capital redemption reserve. Let us examine that. So the reserves will reduce to the extent of the premium paid and the capital redemption reserve. And a new account called capital redemption reserves will appear on the balance sheet. And the cash, the capital will reduce to the extent of the face value of the shares. Once again, to recap, the buyback will reduce the face value of to the extent of the face value of the shares bought back, that is 5,000. The reserves will reduce to the extent of the reserve will reduce to the extent of premium and the capital redemption reserve. Okay, and a capital redemption reserve is created from the reserve. So because of the buyback of shares, there is an outflow of cash of 5,000 and 50,000 for capital and the premium respectively. There is a reduction of capital to the extent of the face value of the shares bought back. There is a reduction in reserves to the extent of the premium that you paid, and a creation of a new account called capital redemption reserves, which will be created to the extent of the face value of the shares bought back from the reserve. And so as a result of this buyback, the number of shares have come down from 10,000 to 9,500. The debt equity ratio has marginally changed because of the PAT being retained fully. So the debt equity ratio has in fact come down despite the buyback. And there's a big fall in the cash because of the buyback of shares. Moreover, we can also see the earnings per share. The earnings per share changes. All other things remaining constant, the earnings per share, which is PAT, divided by the number of shares, falls. The PAT is 93,800 divided by the number of shares. So the EPS before buyback was 9.38 and EPS after buyback is 9.87. So because of the buyback, the EPS has increased. And this is one of the reasons why companies go for buyback, to increase EPS An increase in EPS often leads to increase in the price. So buyback of share is a strategic decision to reduce the capital, increase the EPS, and also increase the market price of the company. Thank you very much.